Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Welcome to the Revelation 13 podcast. The Revelation 13 podcast presents breaking news.
Hello and welcome to the Revelation 13 podcast. I'm your host, Mike Hopwood. Our first news story comes from WorldNet Daily, titled Prophetic Shocker, Romans Didn't Destroy Temple. One of the central tenets of Christian belief in a coming Roman Antichrist is under fire because, as the author of a new book shows, the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD was actually carried out by peoples from the Middle East and not Europe. As Joel Richardson, author of the Islamic Antichrist, writes, one of the pillars of the European Antichrist theory is the prophecy in Daniel 9. The people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. When the temple was destroyed in 70 AD and the city of Jerusalem sacked while under Roman occupation, many prophecy scholars assumed the future dark prince needs to be Roman. However, historical research by Richardson now suggests otherwise. He points out Emperor Augustus made a series of sweeping reforms that led to dramatic changes in the ethnic makeup of the Roman armies. After this time, the army was increasingly composed of anything but Italian or European soldiers. Instead, he writes, they were composed of what were known as provincials or citizens who lived in the provinces of the outer fringes of the empire. Richardson's research found the army that destroyed the temple in Jerusalem was actually overwhelmingly comprised of Middle Eastern peoples, not Europeans. Explicit accounts cited some from Publius Cornelius Tacitus and Titus Flavius Josephus, as well as more modern scholars and historians. All said the historical evidence is overwhelming. After examining a sampling of evidence from both ancient histories as well as the most cutting-edge modern scholarship to date, we may very confidently conclude that the Roman soldiers in the eastern provinces that destroyed Jerusalem and the temple were in fact Eastern peoples, the inhabitants of Asia Minor, Syria, Arabia, and Egypt. Richardson writes again, they were the ancestors of the modern-day inhabitants of the Middle East. Richardson's book stands in stark contrast to most other popular prophecy books over the last 40 years. The student of the Middle East says that after decades of reading popular prophecy books and even best-selling fiction like Left Behind series, millions of evangelical Christians around the world are expecting the Antichrist to emerge from a revived Roman Empire, which many have assumed is associated with the Roman Catholic Church and the European Union. Not so, argues Richardson. His book makes the case that the biblical Antichrist is one and the same as the Quran's Muslim Mahdi. The Islamic Antichrist is a book almost certain to be greeted in the Muslim world with the same enthusiasm as Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses. The author is prepared. He has written the book under a pseudonym to protect himself and his family. The Bible abounds with proofs that the Antichrist empire will consist only of nations that are today Islamic, said Richardson. Despite the numerous prevailing arguments for the emergence of revived European Roman Empire as an Antichrist power base, the specific nations that the Bible identifies as comprising his empire are all Muslim today. Richardson believes that the key error of many previous prophecy scholars involves the misinterpretation of a prediction by Daniel to Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel describes the rise and fall of empires of the future leading to the end times. Western civilizations have viewed one of these empires as Rome. When, claims Richardson, Rome never actually conquered Babylon and was thus disqualified as a possibility. It had to be another empire that rose and fell and rose again that would lead to the rule of this man of sin described in the Bible. That empire, he said, is the Islamic Empire, which did conquer Babylon and in fact rules over it even today. Many evangelical Christians believe the Bible predicts a charismatic ruler. The Antichrist will arise in the last days before the return of Jesus. The Quran also predicts that a man called the Mahdi will rise up to lead the nations, pledging to usher in an era of peace. Richardson makes the case that the two men are in fact one and the same. I'm going to go straight to the next article, which is also similar in nature. Also from WorldNet Daily. New interpretation of identities of Bible's Gog and Magog. The author of a Bible prophecy book has a new spin on the old interpretation of 2 chapters of Ezekiel that most premillennial scholars believe suggests a last days invasion of Israel in the Middle East by a coalition of nations led by Russia. Joel Richardson, author of the Islamic Antichrist, says Ezekiel 38 and 39 have been misinterpreted to point a finger at Russia, a notion widely popularized during the Cold War. Gog is not present or future leader from Russia, writes Richardson in a commentary for WorldNet Daily. Russia is not spoken of in biblical prophecy, despite all the hype and discussion that has been devoted in recent years to casting Russia as the leader of the soon-coming invasion of Israel. The Bible nowhere expresses any such thing. No doubt I will not make very many friends in my own community by doing so. I may even get a few emails accusing me of secretly working for Vladimir Putin himself. But my calling involves the exposition and teaching of what the Bible teaches, not what the consensus is among my contemporary colleagues. On many points, Richardson agrees with conventional Christian thinking of the end times. Like other prophecy teachers, he agrees that the Bible clearly predicts just prior to the return of Christ that the nation of Israel will enter into a comprehensive peace treaty or covenant with the surrounding nations. He agrees that the covenant will be mediated by the man who Christians call the Antichrist. The result, he says, will be a false sense of peace and security for the Jewish nation. 3.5 years after this peace treaty is established, the beast of Revelation will violate the treaty and invade the land of Israel. Richardson writes, Jesus will return during Israel's darkest hour, the time of Jacob's trouble, to save the nation and reestablish the throne of King David on Mount Zion, ruling over the world with a rod of iron, he argues. But most premillennial prophecy teachers have held that Israel will be invaded by another powerful enemy some years before these climatic events. They interpret the passages from Ezekiel 38-39 as describing the separate war led by another leader known as Gog from the land of Magog. Richardson, however, says the invasion is the very same war known as the Battle of Armageddon, and Gog is simply another name for the Antichrist. But here's the kicker. God himself directly addresses Gog, he writes, in speaking to Gog. God says that he is the same evil last days invader that all the former prophets spoke of. In fact, it would have been difficult for God to be any clearer. The passage in Ezekiel 38:17, Thus saith the Lord God, art thou he of whom I have spoken in old time by my servants the prophets of Israel, which prophesied in those days many years that I would bring thee against them. So here the question that needs to be asked, if Gog is Russia, and if all the former prophets spoke about Russia, then why is there not one single passage anywhere in the Bible that speaks about